All right. Back again with Master Jonathan Mozenter and myself, Christopher Kent, on our collective creation that will go out in several different places, one of them being unspeakable bliss, exploring truth, love, and humor with the coolest people alive. And Jonathan continues to check off all of those boxes for me. So we are here today to get into a number of different things, but all revolving around one thing, which is living, experiencing, being part of the greatest reality ever for all beings. Big topic. So before we dive in, I actually had a spontaneous intuition as I was meditating before our podcast. And I didn't even tell Jonathan about it before when we talked. So this is a surprise to him too. I'm getting this feeling of slowing down. And it's funny because Jonathan brought the same thing up to me before we started recording too. And it came to me in the form of an invitation for the listener to take a moment, to receive a moment and to pause and to slow down. And I actually mean that literally too. Pause the podcast and an invitation to set your space up to be open to maximal creativity coming through you, because this, to me, and I'm going to speak for Jonathan on this too, is a living collaboration. And if you get your journal out and just set the conditions to receive downloads and insights and clarities for your life, it's a lot more likely that that's going to happen. And to those that like to listen to a podcast while they're running or jogging, or how you learn best and how you celebrate best. And that's really the energy that we're inviting in for this conversation to create this beautiful reality for all of us. So with those downloads and insights, comment on Jonathan's platforms or on my platforms, or send us a direct message. We really deeply would love to know how this is landing for you. And if there's any follow-up questions, because this is our sixth time doing Spiritual Gangsters from the Future. And that's what makes this alive, is the more of us are involved in conversations like this. So yeah, if you're back and you're listening after you set up your container, maybe got your favorite drink, maybe coffee, tea, whatever it is, lit that candle, Palo Santo, jumping jacks, whatever it is, to create the space of, what it really is, Jonathan, is creating a space of presence and clearing out any distractions to be open to a miracle happening. That's what I want to invite in as we dive into the unknown together, to create something emergent. So we are inviting you, the listener, into this emergent transformational moment that you're giving your attention to this out of everything. Jonathan's giving his attention to me. I'm giving his attention to him, and boom. As we do that all together, even if this just impacts one person, and even if that person is me, even if that person is Jonathan, but the more the merrier is the idea. So please join us in presence and see what miracles arise in your life as a result of sharing our presence together. To me, this is a prayer.
I'm getting the word spotlight is coming up for me. That was a
Mm.
beautiful, I feel like I'm in a different state because you did that, gave me permission to understand that we're not just talking today, we're doing transmissions. We brought in the energies of like, how can we all win at once? And we're going to talk today, we're going to put a spotlight on crosses, but not the cross of the Christ, at least not in how I'm defining it right now. We're going to talk about Ken Wilber and integral theory. And if you look at my diagram with the wizard over his head is one of Ken's most famous models called the quadrants. We'll break that down for you in a little bit. And I want to hit the other cross, and it's called the double Vajra. It's from Tibetan Buddhism, Vajrayana Buddhism. It might be even more ancient than that. What we're going to talk about today is the things that are ancient. And Vajrayana Buddhism is about mastering your mind. So now we got two crosses. Some part of me, in my own defining of the Christ, is maybe it's a movement of wisdom. I'm not so sure it's going to be one person. I think we need a planet of people with Christ consciousness, and maybe later we'll define that. But the other thing I want to point out was about the word slow. Woof. Because I've been a person who's going, I got to be the best Jonathan possible. And then something happened to me is, what if we're all the best version of ourselves, but we just choose to grow because it's so much fun? That contrast from that hero's journey is juicy because you don't really know grit and intelligence and synchronicity if you're just born with everything. So I think a lot of times I do this. What if I was God? Why would I design? I assume the world's already perfect. And I'm like, why would something that has universal intelligence make it exactly like this? And the more I aligned with that understanding, the more everything's just magic. And Ken and his integral theory and the double Vajra were two of my big three. The other one is about energy. And I wanted to go back to slow. Ken talks about this thing. I don't think it came from Ken. There's something about turtles all the way down. And when I was in the Sacred Valley last summer, I worked with a Taoist, and he's just like a really powerful super guy with a lot of stacking and a lot of education and a lot of wisdom. He said, Jonathan, you need turtles. So he put like turtle energy in me, and he said to slow down. Because I was like, go achieve. And sometimes sometimes it's okay to go fast. I actually have no guilt or shame around that. That version of Jonathan was perfect, and he was needed to get me where I am now, where slow. But the other thing, what they're saying about turtles all the way down, is that life is these patterns, like holographic patterns of life. And when we understand the patterns and we align with them and optimize them, life feels way more easy and flow and perfect. I think you can learn about Ken's theories, but all the fun is in applying them. It's all the fun because it's one idea to have an idea, it's another to be it. Because it's really blissful when you use that operating system, both from Ken and from the Vajrayana Buddhism, because it really is different operating systems. And even energy, the way I define it, is a different systems. So I think the future, why I'm so excited about the future, is because all these different systems of wisdom are coming together through the internet and AI. And like there's going to be an explosion point where we're just about there, where, a lot of people's going to get a lot more both intelligent and heart-centered and start training everyone up, because the greatest thing to give someone is this kind of wisdom, to be honest with you, because it's manifestation. I know a lot of people's into manifestation magic. The more you align with the deep patterns of life, energy is always important. The different metaphysical patterns are always there. Your mind's always there. And so that, I think, is the key for what I'm calling the new abundance industry. I think our way out of our problems is we just get a lot smarter, wiser, faster. We spread it quickly, and boom, we get really good at peaceful conflict resolution, and we learn how to live together in harmony. Yeah.
You're preaching to the choir, bro. There's a few points that I want to touch on.
Yeah.
From how I understand what I heard you say and some of the inspirations that synchronicities really that have been coming through just around you revealing the motivation behind this. Before we started recording and before I had that meditation and I got the insight around slowing down that I shared, this idea was coming through of how I'm just a radical optimist. And I was journaling and asking this question, and I feel like it's the essence of what I heard you saying, which is, how am I in the exact perfect right place with all of my problems, we could say, with all of everything that's happening? How is evolution wanting to break out in freedom and joy from the place that I am as a node of consciousness looking in on itself. And as I breathed in, I was breathing in all beings, all the planet. And I was feeling this, and it's like pressing to look through my eyes to be like, yeah, and here is where it's going to happen. And then as I breathed out, it was breathing out to their nodes, looking in on their realities. They're looking at the same thing from a different perspective. They're benefiting equally as they're doing that same thing in their own way. It's like,
Yes.
how is evolution wanting to explode into the next level of joy and celebration? And just by adopting that framework, I feel like it's so much different than how do I get out of this mess I'm in, or something like that, that can be seen from a way of it's coming from brokenness or unwholeness versus how I understand reality. And I know you do too. It's like it's already perfect right now.
Yeah.
And to feel that so deeply, that those are the beams that are then just, I can't even say transmuting imperfection into perfection, but just bringing the truth of Shiva, of Christ consciousness, not in a egotistical, self-centered way, of opening up to the greater energy moving through you and being a vessel in part of this greater reality that so desires the totality of its fullest expression. And so with that, the last thing that I want to touch on is this Vajrayana Buddhism and the intersection between Ken Wilber's work. And I wanted to bring up how even my attraction to sharing with you, that I wanted that to be the area of focus for today's conversation, came to me. And it was in Jonathan Churchill's Planetary Dharma, I think on the retreat weekend or one of the last weekends. A lot of meditation. There was so much just light and clarity pouring through. And it was that same time when Ken Wilber was the guest speaker there. And I was left with this question of how, on an individual, societal, cultural, spiritual, economical, in every way, emotional, raise its level of development in a way that is game-like and fun and bringing so much joy in. And I wrote that question down. This was like over a year ago, and I'm contemplating it. I am it. And I want to continue to nourish the solution space towards flourishing and a human flourishing to your design there, and what's so close to your heart. There's an answer that I know, and I know I'm it. And then there's also a part of it where there's just so much, at least personally, potential that I know like can be laser beams more, but more from a place of not coming from lack. This is it. And this is so I'm left with, it's going to sound like a simplistic thing, but I'm left with like, okay, so wow, what is the process? What is the tools? What is the application where I can wake up every day and be like, that is 1,000% what I'm working on, in a way that is very bhakti, like very devotional to one, to like, I wake up and that's the game I'm playing, and I'm playing it with others that are playing that game too. And I feel very ready to fully say yes to that. So that's the personal exploration that I'm in, honoring all the ways that I am doing that. And I know that there is a part of me that is obscuring me from the vision of fully feeling the appreciation for all the ways that I am doing that, because I know that's so key to doing it in the way that I want to do it. So anyway, that was a lot.
What if we could explore that a little bit right now? You open to that? Because I love the aspiration, and I noticed that there's a feeling that you obviously have this attainment some of the time, and sometimes it's not there. So maybe that causes you some doubt. I don't know. That's a speculation, of course. What is
No,
it
no, that's
from
accurate.
your mind's perspective? Is that true?
Yeah, yeah.
What if I told you that was part of the process?
But there's a sensation of relaxation that comes with
Yeah. Well, it is. I mean, I've been doing these practices from Dan Brown, and John Churchill was my using Dan's system. He was like my coach. So I actually was studying with them both at the
it.
same time. And I studied with him for 10 years. And Dan's map, he breaks, I don't know how John does it in his own program, but in Dan's breaks it into three. The first one is to just get a taste of what you're talking about. And then the second
Mhm.
map is a long map. It's a big map of how do you stabilize it? Because what happens is first you just get it like for a second, and then it's like a couple minutes, comes on for a half hour, and then you're like, damn, I'd like to have this more of the time. I've become a specialist in the second map. I really help people stabilize it and you said something that was like, I was like exploding because I think the key is to gamify it. Because it's fun. Okay, already. I'm just going to tell you, even if you don't gamify it, but there's some pitfalls in it that make people, and Christopher's modeling one of them. Not everyone understands that it's an oscillation game, and you have to figure out what is it the best way for you to stabilize it. And what I did, my method's a little bit unique because I took Dan's stuff and my intuition came on. For those who don't know, Dan Brown was asked by the Dalai Lama to westernize Vajrayana Buddhism. So he took Western psychology. He's like a Harvard professor. He's written a zillion books, 15, 20 books, I don't know, more probably. A lot of them are translations from Tibet. Like he translated these Dzogchen, Mahamudra, Bon, Nigma, Caillou, like different ones. I think he did a lot of Bon particularly, but he got permission from Memory Treason, who's I think the Bon leader, that he could westernize it as long as he kept the essence of it. So they checked it out. They're like over his shoulder, and that's good. And Dan stripped out all the stuff that they didn't think the Westerners would have patience for because I think they do it a little bit slower, and they know that we like to go fast. So Dan got permission to strip things out. So I'm in a lineage that's westernizing Vajrayana Buddhism. And Ken Wilber and Dan Brown wrote a book, and John Churchill and Ken are very close. So we're all influenced by Ken and Western psychology. And so what happened is when I started to get the taste of it, of this thing that you're talking about, where you get this other dimensional kind of, they call it like the Dharmakaya, the truth part, but it's really like a higher frequency, like your higher self goes on board, or you can describe it how you do, but that is for me, like another part comes on as that's part, and then you start listening to it. Like my first part was just like, can you watch this movie, Jonathan? And I'm like, yeah, there's not a lot of downside, 90 minutes, right? It turns out that movie like changed my life. And then like I didn't hear anything from this voice for like a year and a half. And then something happened and it says, you're gonna go to an event and you're gonna meet someone who's gonna change your life. And that happened. I met somebody who introduced me to someone else, and he was helpful. And then he introduced me to one of his teachers, and he was really helpful. And it turns out that you develop a relationship with this voice, at least it is for me. And this is part of the oscillation. So I'm telling you this in infinite, because if people don't know what it looks like, it's a lot harder. So I know a lot of people's like reading stuff on the internet and a book, but they don't. Because I check in with the AI a lot about this, they don't know all the details. I want to go back to you, Christopher, here about this thing. What I've noticed, and I got this from Dan, is that the mind likes to label things, and they label things based on the past. They call it reference points. Like some part of the mind's like, there's anything similar situation to this? That's true unless you have enough higher frequency energy, like a higher state, where some part, your creative part comes on, like your multiple perspectives, your creativity. But if you don't have enough energy, you're gonna go back and reference something from your library, like Jonathan's personal library of how did he handle it in the past, because I don't have enough energy to like be creative and novel, right? The meditation practice that Dan uses is also an energy practice. So what I noticed, and then I want to ask you a question about your thing, is when I've noticed in me doing this deep subtle work is that I could actually, as I've got more and more energy, zooming like a microscope back into deeper layers of consciousness, I can actually see how childhood Jonathan is imprinting things. And I just took one layer off at a time, and it became like a game. But you have to set up the right conditions to do that. You have to know what it looks like. You have to have the right protocols. You got to work with energy, really, and patterns of life. So I'm getting from you, are you aware, because you talked about perfect in Vajrayana Buddhism, I took a class on just 21 guys who achieved the highest state in Vajrayana Buddhism, which is rainbow body. I don't know any other spiritual tradition that does that, but I think it means they're good at something. I'm not saying they're good at everything, but they know something that other people don't know, because that's a pretty cool magic trick, right? And every one of them, dude, they said the same. Well, my first lesson I wrote down, and you said it so perfectly, which tells me how enlightened you already are. I don't think you're giving me enough credit. Perfect. Everything is perfect the way it is, because you're transmitting it already. And I'm just telling you, from someone who maybe been doing it, I got 22 years on age on you, is that's what it looks like. Is like you sometimes you see it perfect, and when your energy drops, you actually go back to being a critic or a judge or really reactive. Let's talk about Gene Keys for a second, right? His partner is a Gene Keys master, and Gene Keys is a really good map blueprint, right? And they have what's called in Ken Wilber's world lines and levels. So every key, there's 62 of them or 64 keys, right? Yep, 64 keys, and each one has 3 levels to it. There's like the shadow, the gift, and the city. So it's like, but most people don't worry about the city. The city's kind of like boom. It's what Dan Wilber will call the third map after you beyond it. But the actual oscillation can be predicted through those charts and some of the tools. I did a Gene Key reading with Zlaka, and she told me, first off, that my career, she's like, Jonathan, you have the 14-1 in vocation. She says, that means you're here to start something, which I'm calling the new abundance industry. And it's about spreading this skill so people can rapidly become enlightened. And actually, in my first key, the first 2 keys are called programming partners. And if you, from my perspective, the smartest place to start with the Gene Keys is just in the first 2, because the first 2 activate the next 2, and the first 4 are called the activation sequence. You get your genius on board, and it actually predicts, because that I'll study something like Buddhism, because it's actually detachment is my number 1 gift of, I think it's 42 Gene Key 42 celebration. So I say that because there's blueprints for everyone, not only about you specifically, but also about the dimensions of life that are not just Ken Wilber, but around. And people like Christopher and I are already stacking them together in creative ways to amplify it, because when you use them together intelligently, things really take off. So I wanted to go back to you, Christopher. I wanted to, one, talk a little bit about the oscillation and the perfection and that relaxation you felt, because trust me, you're an advanced brother. And also that's what it looks like on map 2. So use it on map 2 right now, and probably deep into it. And it takes a while. Like I was on map 2 for a long time, like a good 10 years. So don't judge yourself for being like advanced at something. That's silly. But also I get it. The reason why I get it is because you're going to be critical and judge when you're in a low energy state. That's all it is. So I give you permission to relabel anytime you see it as not perfect, or as the Buddhists call it, ma rigpa, that's also perfect. That is a form of rigpa, because it's reminding you, oh yeah, this isn't my highest frequency. I even asked Dan to retreat. I said, Dan, I think ma rigpa is rigpa because it reminds me to go to rigpa every time. And he did this long pause, and he turned to me, the whole class, like 50, 60 people, and he got really big. He goes, game over. And he says, you can never fall off the path once you have that realization. I say that to spread Dan's wisdom, right? Ma Rigpa, it doesn't mean you're off the path. It just means you're in a low energy state. That's it. Stop judging yourself. It doesn't mean you're not doing the practice right. It's just mean when you're in a low energy state, your critic comes on, your judge comes on, your defense patterns come on. That's how life works. And that's one of my big additions. So I'd be curious to hear maybe also if you have any insights about the Gene Keys or any other archetypes that have helped you with your growth. Because I think this is what integrally informed development looks like, is combining different things.
I'm not going to directly address the different tools or things in this initial response, because I think the energy is just, it's really clarifying right now in this moment, and it's vulnerable.
Yeah.
to have such a moment, but that's what I asked for. That's what I was praying for. When I opened up the space, it's like I'm having a key insight right now as a result of our exchange. And I'm going to share that because I trust that it's related to everyone's key insights and development as well. So the first piece is orientation. You mentioned like this stage, and then you mentioned the gene keys, which is all about orientation as well. And there's something. So I'm seeing the intersection between this perfection piece that you're speaking of, and I do mean that as a play on words, perfection piece. And so often I am aware that the stage that I'm in, and this is where it intersects and loops, and I get into an unhelpful loop because I'm too caught in, oh, this isn't it. It isn't working. And then I remember again, I'm like, no, but this is it. And it is working. I'm like, oh, yeah. Okay. But if I get too in this isn't it, this isn't working, there is a perspective of so clearly, and this is where it feels like it's lucidly going into whatever the next stage would be. See the loop so clearly right now, bro. It's from that perspective, no tool or anything I've done in the past is going to work for this. And I know that. Look back into my personal and pull all of it out, and I'm like, nope, none of it is applicable to this. And so that's where helplessness can come in. It's like, oh no, it's not here, and it's not in my past, but yet there's a knowing, to say it in a different way, I can't solve a problem at the same level that it was created.
Yeah.
And there's that awareness that's then holding me in the reality of what I am. The solution actually exists. And that's not from one perspective, it's a bad thing that nothing from my past is going to help me. Oh no. And then from a greater perspective, it's, bro, that's the solution right there. Yeah. So I can see, this is like, I'm really trying to articulate how helpful this is in orienting, because I can see the solution so perfectly is to go into that relaxation. And remember that no matter what's happening, no matter what appears to be happening, it's because that is development, and it's the acceptance and compassion that comes online for that's where you're at with that. And that's perfect.
Said, brother.
And remembering the perfection of it. So I'm like,
yeah,
I'm going to have to re-listen to this part of our conversation to really, I am and I'm not.
Yeah.
Because the part sneaks in and be like, you have to remember this. And it's like, bro.
Yeah. Conscious language. I got it.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to comment on that because it was beautiful. I love that you grounded. You have a son, like you got to a place where you're overwhelmed, and then you quickly went inside and you found ground, and then you popped out right away into this like version of yourself that felt like you had trust, faith, confidence, and not only compassion for yourself. You're like, I might not have figured it out right now, but this is part of the process, part of the dream. This is the magic right here. Nobody has all the answers right away. It doesn't matter how enlightened you are. I think, to me, a definition of enlightenment is, or an aspect of it is, you love the process of life, including like not knowing and mystery, But what I call what you did, you did it, demonstrated really well, mode switching. So it sounds like you got either had it and or probably like developed it. You switched modes. You kind of like had, an energy drop or doubt or criticism, and then you move back to like perfection, higher self. It was a really beautiful model. And yeah, did you see that in yourself?
Dude, I just wrote this down. Having compassion with yourself no matter where you're at, remembering the perfection of the wholeness right now. And I'm writing that down as you're speaking because it's so there's just so much compassion for the beautiful, what can even be sometimes seen as tragedy, drama of life. And it's just like, oh yeah, I only forgot. I didn't forget
Yeah.
anything. The lighthearted, like,
That keep going.
are you getting,
No,
the
I am. Well,
flavor?
I'm getting, but I wanted to, because you just modeled something so incredible. I wanted to like call it out because I think it'll be good for you, for everyone in the room. But the audience, that you did something common, which is you got this huge heart, brother. Like I see you. I know you that you want to play big. We even talked in the call that your most important thing is beauty for everyone. So a common thing with somebody who has that archetype, and I work with these
Liberation
guys
and
with,
freedom for
yeah.
everyone.
Let's just listen. I want to get your feedback on this. Is like sometimes as we're awakening and we see how awesome it is, another part of us is like, and this is part of being a bodhisattva, man. They call it the pain of other people not seeing what, and then it's a part of you can, but there's a part of that can be ma rikpa, and I want to explain that really quickly because what happens, you feel a little guilty and shame and like, I'm happy, but I know a lot of people are suffering. The thing about that, when you play it out, like that's a natural response. But here's the thing: is when you ask yourself a realistic question, how can I help them less suffer? And then what kind of mode would I want to be in order to do that? And myself came up to the answer, well, you're probably going to want to enjoy what you're doing and give your gifts. That doesn't mean that you never come down, but as a baseline, it's actually better for you to serve other people who aren't suffering, to actually show what's possible, tell your story, show how you can help, point to other people who can help, because it's going to be a team thing. I've worked with a lot of teachers and worked with a lot of modalities. There are certain people who had a bigger imprint on me, and there's a lot of assists from other people too. So, but my point is, I give you permission when you notice that happening to ask the question that I ask myself: how can I serve? Does it serve me to collapse like that? Probably now and then, especially if you're like, how can I help these specific people I'm working to? You might want to get into their world and feel what they're feeling and then be like, how can I help them? Right. But in terms of like, if you're delivering something, you're probably not going to want to do it from a sad, depressed, guilt rich place. No, this works. It's going to work for me and it's going to work for you. So that's why my metacognition always asks, what is it that this state, is it optimal or not? Like when I was working with Dan does this thing where he says on the pillow practice, like you meditate on the pillow, you do his meditations, and then they call it the non-meditation meditation, which is you use the distinctions that you got from the pillow and you just apply it. There's a difference from thinking about it and being it. And I basically, look, it's different for everyone. I'm not recommending people do it exactly my way, but I basically, after 7 years, my higher self was like, Jonathan, you don't need to do any more on the pillow, but you got to do a lot off the pillow. And this is what works for you. You learn better through experiential learning than you do sitting on a pillow labeling something. And so it actually like put me on like a tantric fun adventure. It was like after I left my job, and it taught me all the things I needed to learn in a fun game. It felt safe, but it did cause me to grow and be with mystery and trust the higher, because literally the fun game is trusting the higher intelligence, because you get to keep all your local intelligence, but then you get zingers from the transpersonal that just make it way more fun and help you like shortcut things. And so yeah, I just want to know if that's possible for everyone. So just getting back to what I'm saying, how does that land for you on the feeling guilty or shame, and like how do you deal with that? What does that do for your field?
Mm. And the importance of what is a tool. I think it's actually the answer to everything. Compassion, man. So often, actually, specifically, a practice called compassionate self-forgiveness, and there's like a specific framing for it. I learned it at the University of Santa Monica, soul-centered living program. So I want to give credit to them and also share that this is,
Yeah.
I don't think it's a trademark, it's a tool exactly, because it's truly ageless, because I feel like it gives one access to seeing through the eyes of Christ and living in a field of Christed consciousness. To an earlier point that you were making, is not in any one being, yet can be witnessed in all beings. And this is exactly what I do when I find myself caught in guilt, shame, blame, anything, not all the time. Not all the time, but when I catch myself and I'm like, okay.
That's normal.
So compassionate self-forgiveness. And this would be an invitation too for anybody that wanted to try it on as well. It starts with one story, and there's a few places where the blanks get filled in, and then it just really, the process of it is the only thing I need to say. And then what I'm going to do is practice it right here and right now on myself. And so, of course, I'm going to be experiencing it, but as far as I can see, if I'm experiencing it, well, Om Namah Shivaya, it's experienced by all, because I am connected to the all in this way, in every way. Another way to say my healing is your healing. Very intimately so, how I experience reality. So it's the balm of compassion that leads to the next statement to go deeper. And so, although this is formulaic and using the part of the mind that is logic oriented and will be learning something new, well, it's a practice. And with any practice, the more one relaxes and allows the technology of the practice to enter, like a song that you already know without knowing how you know it, then how you know it becomes apparent by effortlessness. I compassionately forgive myself for buying into the misidentification that I am unworthy. I compassionately forgive myself for buying into the misidentification that I am separate from the Creator. I compassionately forgive myself for buying into the misidentification that I could ever be off the path. I compassionately forgive myself for buying into the misunderstanding that there was any part of me beyond forgiveness. I compassionately forgive myself for buying into the misidentification that there was anything ever to forgive in the first place. And so I'll just work with one statement again and again and again and again until there's an unlocking that happens, and it leads to a deeper statement, one that makes sense to my heart of the first statement. And it's like going to a new peak on a mountain and seeing the sun for the first time, a deep inspiration of completeness and a knowing of the next step to treating myself as I treat others and knowing the oneness of my existence through compassion. It's really hard to put into words, but I have witnessed miracles. I've witnessed miracles through the work of forgiving myself. And that's the key to this, is that there's no condemner out there, and there's nothing to condemn out there. It's radical ownership for I am cleansing the lens of my perception, because that's something I can do. I can do that any moment the guilt comes on, the this comes on. It's just boom. Let me train myself, just like in meditation, as I return every time. It's more about and I think this can be said of any practice, it's more about how I'm doing the practice than if I'm doing the practice, right? Mm-hmm. Am I returning compassionately to the breath? Because I wasn't paying attention, or I did it wrong, or did it because the old neural firing of that story that
the reference
point. Like, boom, yeah, boom, forgiveness. It's just
trying to replace compassion over judgment.
Yeah, exactly. Treating it as though it's, oh, I missed the mark. The word sin, right? It means to miss the mark, but like in a neutral way.
From whose point of view did you miss it, though?
Exactly. I know. Yeah, and it's Oh man, from whose point of view did I miss
it? Yeah, like that's how compassionate was that point of view.
Yeah, and that's how it is, like turtles all the way down and eagles all the way up. And
eagles all the way up.
Because the
freedom,
the ego piece that you're speaking to is like, there it is again. Oh, okay, but I see it, and it's how I see it.
Yeah,
really loving. Oh, there's something about the eagles all the way up where it's like,
I like that, eagles all the way up.
distinction, and then the story. It's like, oh, a story that you were distracted from. Whose point of?
I love that. I feel like that's the name of the episode. Eagles all the way up. Because it's beautiful from metacognition. A lot of people think metacognition, thinking about thinking, and eagles all the way up. Like it's like you're going deeper into the unconscious, but it's also an altitude thing. You're just going, do I want to do that anymore? Yes. Is this one useful? Not really. Okay, let's let that old pattern go. Let's put in the new compassionate discernment. Because I think not only do
into the unconscious, bro. You said going deeper into the unconscious, but doing it where it's inverting and raising consciousness at the same time.
You're shining light into the unconscious. You're making it conscious. So you're making unconscious conscious all the way. And what are you making conscious of? Patterns. And we've been dancing around this one, but from my perspective, the one thing we haven't talked to is honoring feelings, man. Those feelings just want to be felt. You don't have to. Buddhism is about one thing. It's not a religion. It's about liberation. What's it liberating? Conditioning from feelings to conditioned response. Because if you can be with all the senses and the feelings and bring in this magical, transpersonal soul intelligence, higher self intelligence, wisdom to every moment that includes compassion and love and, how to bring father and mother archetypes and magical collaboration within us, is to be more intelligent and wise. We can actually train ourselves to it. That's why I'm not worried. I don't think the world's in a bad place. I don't think I think it's just a spreading a wisdom issue. That's the only thing that's stopping the planet from being A plus for everybody to feel. When I say A plus, everyone can feel this magic. It's the keys on how to do it are known. It's just the next answer is how do we have an integrally informed approach to spreading good patterns? Because even Vajrayana Buddhism is just patterns of the mind.
That's the question.
It's patterns of the mind, right? And integral theory is like it mentions Vajrayana Buddhism as something called a waking up line, but it's broader. Because now we're how we talked about, do I think the Tibetan Buddhists are great at everything? No, but they're really good at this. And I think different people around the world, different traditions, different countries, we all have different kinds of expertise. So I used to spend a lot of my life as an organizational development consultant professionally over 20 years. So I think about those people think about what are the qualities or capacities in order to have this way of being. So that's kind of how I think about it. So in Ken Wilber's language, it would be like lines and levels. But I'm thinking like, well, if somebody wants to like get these skills, but still like go for their dreams and have a good time, how would I teach it, and who would I teach it to, and like how do you get it to them quickly using what from Vajrayana is, but also about Ken. So Ken talks about cleaning up, and cleaning up is a lot about that. Yeah, the reference points.
Let's talk about.
Well, let me just finish this one thing.
Yeah, no.
The feelings, because you got to feel feelings. If you don't feel a feeling fully, it triggers off these reference points. All children, we come in here with no idea how to be an earth person. She's a baby, and there might be subtle imprints, but beyond that, all children get overwhelmed. Holy shit, how do I deal with this 3D reality? And they make up parts, defense patterns to when they get overwhelmed, right? Everybody does it. And these are deep because they're like our safety guys is number one. So in order to get them off, so you can be fully in this higher place, and other kind of parts, critics judge, and other parts that from IFS, you actually have to feel the feeling that it's protecting. It's like a feeling plus an intensity level, at least from my perspective. And I've done a lot of this work, and I have to sometimes go to different feelings over and over again, but like it multiple times because I suppressed like energy level 6 for this many years, and 7 for this many years, and 8. And it takes a while, but there's an end. Even Buddhists call it dharma dhatu exhaustion. You want to talk about cleaning up? To exhaustion means you exhaust all of the bin of the things that are preventing you from being with, the fullness, is high energy. So there's a certain vantage point where you do finish this work where, it gets your baseline. They call it like the natural state. It's relaxed. It's like you're reborn because your nervous system has cleared all the old shit from the past, and then you get to remap it from a higher wisdom state, because you're definitely going to gain a lot of wisdom by doing this practice. You're just going to get a lot more intelligent, because you're going to be, every time you feeling deeper, you're going to learn a lesson, probably a lot of lessons, because there's wisdom in pain. So anyways, I'm a big fan because it makes people human. I want everyone to know, once you kind of said it, once you know that you know the truth, all you want to do is spread it to everyone, because everyone's got a mind. It's good to have. It's good wisdom, and I wish everybody had it.
No doubt, man. Yeah.
What feeling were you feeling when you were like having that energy of the forgiveness thing?
A deep was.
Okay.
Deep, like a compassion.
I felt that.
You're talking what I was doing. Yeah.
But also like the need to do that practice. It felt, I could be totally wrong. This is just a vantage point. It's not the right answer. But part of me is like, it sounds like most people can agree with this, is that, sometimes they make up a story that they're separate from God. And I think that's true. I would say now that's part of the fun, because the fun is having the contrast, because it feels so good. When you jump up, dude, it's but then you stabilize it there. You're like, damn, all and you're like proud of all the work. It's just the contrast is the meaning. I'm sure you've heard that phrase. If this is a spiritual law, I wish everyone understood. Why isn't everything already feel like cloud nine? Because cloud that would get boring pretty quickly. It's the contrast in the hero's journey. It's boom, once you get there, then you get to stay there and live there. And you have all this appreciation of it does take effort. I don't want to make up a story as hard or impossible. That's not going to help people. But I'm also not going to say you're not going to take a pill like a pharmaceutical and get there, or even a psychedelic. I don't believe that happens. But you can take psychedelics and move faster if you use them intelligently. You know what I mean? That I'm a big fan of psychedelic Buddhism, but it doesn't. It's not gonna because there's a lot of thing reference points to unhook. You know. So, anyways.
The thing that I want to explore deeper a little bit ago, and I think it has everything to do with what you're sharing now too, is what you're saying about Ken Wilber's work and like how to make this, how to teach it, and how for it to be fun, and because that's the answer to that, or the exploration around that is essentially what I've been asking about his work too. It's okay, so the application of it. Let's even as you were saying with the insight and more work off the cushion than on the cushion, it's like get it, apply it.
Okay. So what it looks like is understanding that growth has different dimensions of reality. So we've been talking a lot about waking up from the traps of the mind. We've been talking about certain distinctions that happen in your process to move from what Buddhists would call ordinary mind, where you like some stuff, you don't like some stuff, to extraordinary mind, awakened awareness, where you're sourcing from the universe and yourself. You're not removing local intelligence. It's additive. It's like another layer. Plus, you have the ability, Manjushri's the god of wisdom. He teaches you to not take your interpretations of your experience like seriously. It's like his wisdom is like maybe, and then like you decide. So we go from, oh, it's definitely this because it's how I referenced in the past, to I don't know, I'm not feeling that one yet. Maybe let's see some other options. Okay, that one looks good, or let's combine 1 and 4. You know what I mean? Like you just become more intelligent because you got a lot more possibilities. You have to have it's an energy thing too. You got to have energy to hold these other possibilities, and then you want to have. That's why that alone isn't enough, right? Because then you're going to want to have discernment, right? Intelligence, like discriminating wisdom about this, generating the possibilities. But it's a whole other, what Ken would call, line of development to sense make out of it. How can I quickly assess the pros and cons of that one, or how likely different things will do, or how much is this? Because sometimes you get a blast from out of nowhere that feels really strong and confident, even if it doesn't feel rational. But the transpersonal probably doesn't care what kind of cereal you have in the morning. You know what I mean? Whether you like your eggs over easy or scrambled. So it's not like that. It's gonna give you an important blast. And so, it's like, how do we use discernment when we are bringing in different kinds of knowing? Is that?
I have a specific question for you.
Go for you.
Around something that you just said, and it's about the distinction point. And you're talking about discrimination, and with distinction, you were saying the transpersonal. Yeah. So, my question's kind of nested in the meaning that I guess transpersonal. My mind goes to, I don't know if the transpersonal, and I think you're talking about, cares if you're homeless or the richest man in the world as well. And like that applies to all, or if you're.
So yeah, well, I'm going to go beyond Buddhism on this one, and because I like to mix ideologies, what makes sense to me in my lived experience. There's a transpersonal, one of my teachers calls it like soul intelligence, Donnie Epstein, and he differentiates it from a more collective intelligence, which he calls Weaver, or the synchronicity arm of that collective. And he says they work together, but they're also separate. So I imagine it this way. There's a part of me that's kind of can see everything I do, even if I'm unconscious of it. And if I learn how to connect with it, I can, like a higher self, it will guide me. It'll give me wisdom. My guy's very process oriented, and I've given permission for him to do that. In other words, he keeps me safe, but he wants me to learn lessons in the way that I learn lessons. As a kid, I had a hard time paying attention in school. Yeah, I like reading, but only if it really interests me. If it was like
Mhm.
dull as stuff, it was like whatever ADD mind, which I later learned is one of my defense patterns. But I want to stick to this transpersonal question because it's a big deal and connecting people, help each person find their unique way to do it. There's definitely a part of the transpersonal that cares a lot about you and it wants to connect with the other part so that you can be useful. So most of the time, it's going to be like getting your vehicle ready so you're even useful because, not everyone in their current level of development is, ready to be very useful on a big stage, right? And I mean, a big stage, I mean like a big influencer, whether they're inventing something behind the scenes and nobody knows their name or they're literally on stage. I mean, someone who's got skills to impact, and it can happen at different points in your life in different ways. But so, some part of you absolutely does care about that, right? I think that there's a part of the transpersonal that's responsible for the entire planet, for example. So, it might think very strategic. And it's not that it doesn't care about the homeless, but what it would like is to solve the homeless pattern fast. And he wants to work through other people's souls to get the people in the right place in the right order. I think I have something to say about homeless. I'd love to work with other people in that field, but I'm not going to do all the jobs. I just would mix in my understanding because a lot of the reason that people are homeless isn't because there are not enough houses, it's because they're mentally ill. They have parts that are telling them nasty stories about themselves, and then they don't have enough energy to move in with society. I'm sure that not all homeless people are like that, but there's a segment of population that are chronically homeless that they would just probably label them mentally ill or give them some sort of a disorder. But the disorder is the defense part. So if you can teach them to operate beyond this disorder, then there's hope for these people. There's hope for everyone. Again, there's hope for everyone who puts in the effort. So does that kind of give you some deep learning? Because I think there are different dimensions of transpersonal. So everything you said, I think is, to use a favorite Ken word, true but partial. There's some truth to it, but maybe there's more subtler dimensions to it. There's other vantage points to look at it. So that's how I hold it, at least.
Yeah, yeah. I think all of those are useful distinctions. And I realized there's a distinction that I didn't make in giving the choices of the
Okay.
transpersonal not caring. And it has to do with, so just, I said homeless and starving, right? Or
Mm.
richest person and well fed. There's a state of consciousness through effort, but also I think by grace, where what the homeless individual that I was referring to is totally liberated. They're not, they don't, they're good. They're like a freaking saint. You know what I mean? And then the same applying to the starvation as well. Like, I think that there's a level of awareness or consciousness that one can reach where they're good. Like, they're so at one with God, Creator, Atman, and so surrendered that no matter what's happening to them, they're just like, it's an important distinction because I didn't want to paint in
Yeah.
like that there's inherently suffering there for someone that's homeless or starving.
Yeah.
One of those monks that went and sat in a fire, like unflinchingly, until he left his body. But
Yeah.
like a level of, so yeah, I felt like that was important because
Okay.
yeah,
I mean, that guy chose like the monk who I don't know anything about his attainment, but let's just assume he made a choice, soul made a choice that it was better for the collective for him to commit suicide in that way to make a point, a political point. Jesus did in some ways. I'm not judging that good or bad or wrong, and I'm not judging anyone who's homeless good or bad. There's a difference between why you're homeless. I was talking about like chronically homeless people who don't want to specifically.
Yeah, right.
But
And I wasn't talking about that when I was in the way that I was asking it. So that's why I wanted to make that.
okay, yeah, but what do you value, right? Because a lot of spiritual traditions and even some versions of Buddhism tell you to get cut off of your desire body. I don't know. I'm bullshit on that. Like, not for me. I believe in something called the abundance industry, and I believe if real wisdom of manifestation that's grounded in reality happens, that people follow it, they will be able to have an awesome life in the spiritual and the material at the same time without any guilt or shame. It's like there's plenty on the earth to go around.
I believe it's
It's
possible
it's
for all.
it's it's an energy and discernment thing. People just are, honestly, from my perspective, and I'm going to use some Ken Wilber stuff here. Ken talks about different stages of development. He uses something that several people have done, but Claire Graves and then Don Beck added to it, called the spiral dynamics, is probably its most popular one. There's some other people who had similar models, but let's give Claire Graves things because he did science behind it. He's probably the first one who's used social science to validate it. When Don Beck worked on it and Ken popularized it, okay, in his own way. And did he tweak it a little bit or add to it? I believe he did. And so, but Ken's what they both all point to. There's I'm going to go slow down here because each stage, it's like you got to go back to caveman. What is caveman trying to do? Survive, right? It's the first thing. It's just trying to survive. And so every major dominant worldview starts with survival for sure, because survive, you don't survive, nothing else matters. It's always the top priority. So and then what happens is it goes into another thing called mythic. But what's going on in mythic? They're trading tribe. So it's a little bit more individual. Like, I got a rock, I'm trying to protect my baby and kids. There's a drive to have sex and have raised kids and protect. That was like caveman. And then we get tools together, and people, the monkeys, the humans, whatever, they decide if they work together in a tribe, actually survival's way better. Like, they get some teamwork. Maybe there's a lot of these tribes, there was actually a person who was a shaman who was usually the leader, I believe, back then. And he was rain dances and stuff like that. He was the one who had a good imagination and willing to be a little different. And people like a I don't know, I almost want to call him like a cult leader. He's like a cult leader. A cult leader, just somebody, a leader of got a bunch of people to follow a bunch of rules, whatever. Let's break it down. It's a leader of some people. Agorize, a cult's kind of a dirty word these days. So it's just like he created a tribe, right? Let's use tribe. It's a healthier word. And then what happens is people get sick of the third one. Is like some people in the tribes, like, this dude or this leadership is too dominant. Fuck this bullshit. And they get really aggressive and they're like, I'm going back to like just doing whatever I want. Like, and the next stage has a little bit more like breaking free from the tribe. And right, that's the third stage. And then people like, that's not going to go well either. We're killing each other again. And like, we need to have some rules. Maybe I get this independence thing is important and we don't need just to have one leader. We got to have some rules, right? And this is where organized religion comes in. What's some rules, some ground rules, so we don't kill each other too much? How do we do it? It's like all of those traditions are about human flourishing, and they're all like, what makes a good life? How do we make it just? And so what happens there is we start getting into rules. Is like the fourth level on the spiral, and then the rules work for a while until some people's, I don't know, it depends on how you measure the rule. This is stupid. I know it's very traditional, and some people's, I don't know, they start questioning the rules. The way I assess things, this rule's stupid, or I got a better rule. And this is where science and measurement and like eventually turns into like capitalism and stuff. Is now we've got a whole way of measuring success multidimensionally slowly over time. So we're not just relying on tradition, because a lot of people's glued to these rules because they saved them from this aggressive period like the Roman Empire. So that's a very aggressive period, and some religions were coming on board to counter it, right? But what happens then is that sometimes the measurement then piece like leaves people out. Like, they're like, okay, well, we right now we're choosing whoever's got money and beauty, and then whoever got it first. And we start calculating which races and religions are, I don't know, we're counting all kinds of things now. And some people's like, it's not fair. Some people got it and it's unjust. And we see it as like this woke movement or there's like this kind of like, let's make it more justice, the inequality. And, there's some truth to that. This is all predicted in this guy, Claire Gray's model called spiral dynamics. But here's the big turn, folks. This is why he calls it integral theory. When you get to the seventh level, you start seeing the whole model. It's almost like you're up high, like a God view, like an eagle view, in the whole spiral, the whole design. And we're like, none of these people are bad or wrong. They're just attached to what their tribe is trying to solve, the issue that their tribe's trying to do it. And why is things chaotic right now in the world right now? Because there's a lot of tribes on the planet right now. I'm sure there's still traditional people. There's still people, aggressive people at that stage. There's people doing rain dances somewhere, I'm sure. Maybe there's pockets of cave people somewhere. I've seen videos show up on TikTok of like they saw some tribe and they still look like there's still at one of the first few levels. But most people in America are either traditional or they're at this measurement thing. And you can be a combination of them. You're not necessarily one or the other, but this part that's more associated with the heart and more diversity and justice. And I want to talk about that because that's a beautiful intention and they're doing as best as they can. But there's another level called integral where you start integrating all of them and you get when you integrate it, and you don't just see the whole spiral like in a book and you get the magic. You actually have to see where maybe you have blocks around certain ones, or maybe you got addictions to others and you're overusing it. And how can you take the lesson of all of them and think about them as different value structures? How can we have a healthy diversity, but how can we still stay competitive and measurement things? How do we honor tradition? How do we honor groups, but also individuality? So an integral approach assesses things from multiple value sectors simultaneously and understands that in the ability to do that and to do other higher, more developed things, it requires growth in different dimensions, different lines and levels. And so that's beautiful. It's just more intelligent. To me, it's not really a religion. It's just deconstructing life, and it's a big tent because it can hold all the religions at once with love and compassion and also constructive criticism. Because sometimes what could be how some of these prophets were a long time ago, we've learned a lot more. They may have been A plus plus for their time, but now we got bigger microscopes, telescopes, and we got everyone around the world communicating with supercomputers. We might know some things that they didn't know, right? And we're not judging them. That would be uncompassionate. We see them as superheroes for their time, and now we need new superheroes who see clearly with love and intelligence. And I would say those two go together. To me, it's not about masculine or feminine or heart or mind. It's how do we bring all those quadrants with all those vector lenses and dance magically and meet the moment. It's a little bit about integral. We can get into some of the more details, but what's that doing for your curiosity?
Yeah, I'm down to go into integral much deeper. There's just one thing that was coming to my mind.
Yeah.
Let's talk about how it's already being done, how you're doing it, how
Yes.
it's happening, and how we can contribute to that in that gamified, exciting way for sure. And then
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just the one thing that came up was this article that I read recently. I feel like it maps on quite nicely to the framework that you were talking about. Is about how communities or tribes, cults, whatever you want to call it, groups of people are formed. And it was talking about it framed it in a way as pitfalls. One being not enough structure. So it's too structureless.
Yep.
And then the other one was too much structure or too much dogma, too much order, really. We could just say, right? So too much chaos, too much order, essentially. And then the third one was, and I was thinking about this when you're talking about when there starts to become a focus on like who's got the most money or the most beauty. It's a lack of intimate connection. It's a lack of shared, actually engaging in. I think the way that it was framing it up is an example would be going to a bunch of transformational, it could be meditations, it could be a ceremony practice, but not enough actual through intimacy. So in a way, focusing too much on method and less forgetting that we're doing it with very intimately with ourselves, with doing it with others in a group way. And those are the three different ways that this article was saying any one of those can be the pitfall, but it also could be the evolution, as we're talking about, to the next version where there's a healthy balance. Is essentially what I heard you saying in the share. There's got to be a healthy balance.
Yes. I think you brought in a beautiful dimension, which is about structure and too much structure, too little structure. How do we hold structure? Because it can feel confining. That's why I'm getting flexible structures, but also like some structures are actually better in a certain situation than others. And I'm not here to claim it like I'm right. If you're curious, you can try them out for yourself and test them out. That's all I ask for, which is what Ken would call the openness line of development. So that's also a structure, ironically, because it's open. Openness means like, you're willing to run some new experiments. Because if you're too traditional, that stifles growth a lot. And growth is heavily valued around in life, certainly here in the United States. I'm personally growth is one of my guys. Growth can fuel every other dimension. So openness plus some structures help. And here's the beautiful thing for some people who don't like to be confined as a structure. I like to rotate structures because I don't like to be confined by structure either. But sometimes I don't use any structure, but sometimes I bring 5 combined or I bring in Z. I'm like a Santa Claus of structures and distinctions. My goal is to master the moment. So I just really think about what structure would be useful right now. I ask my subtle consciousness is always asking that in a good way, in a proactive way. And I'm getting non-dual is a really interesting structure that has like almost infinite meanings, and different traditions hold it in like it only means this. It only means this. It means one thing, not two. That's what it means. Non-dual literally means not two. Anything else, there's certain people who believe it means other things, and it does, but that's actually its gift, because one of its meanings, to me at least, and more important ones, from two different vantage points, it's still the same. The truth can be seen from different points. There's like what literally happened in the 3D and then how people see it. And they might see some parts the same, some people different, depending on who they are. Like a bee's not going to see the same thing as a human, but they're still seeing the truth from their relative perspective. So non-dual means it's not separate. Like everyone is sending. There's another definition on this. Every time we move a choice, it affects something in the people's around perception at some subtle level, sometimes overtly, and that affects the person. And that way, we're not separate. Like we're energy beings, moving around, bouncing off each other, not two. But the point I want to make is number one, openness. Like we're talking about, how do you approach Wilber's work in practice? Not just by pulling out a book, but practicing it. Openness is one of the big ones, because you want to open up your mind. And that doesn't mean you throw everything out. It's like, I'm willing to run some experiments. Like literally, we're all spiritual human scientists. like for example, I specialize in people who want to take risks and experiment, not in a risk like a skydiving, like you could die kind of risk, but you're going to get out of your comfort zone and try on new perspectives and new actions. Because I'm in the transformation game, which you're too. But for me, you can specialize in different kinds of clients. I love the people who's already running and they want some more maps. They want some more patterns from someone who studied with a lot of great teachers and had a lot, and not just study with them, but live them and made them his own, right? Like that's for me. So this is about making matches, right? And so, but the integral theory can really help people make great matches. It isn't just about me making my match. I'm saying you can start to archetype yourself and realize that you went on a certain hero's journey in a certain domain. Technology is going to help us in the best way. It's going to take away these jobs we don't like, but it's going to open up a whole bunch of other jobs that are going to be way more fun. So to me, there's this new abundance community when you use Ken's model, because we're still going to want to have fun and grow and develop more from Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We're going to self-actualization is going to be eventually big for a lot more people than is now, because they're not going to have as much. They're going to use these AI agents, and for those who go there and to do all the tasks they don't want to do, you got to set it up and everything. But what if people understood, if you put in the effort to learn some of these distinctions, some of them technological, some of them about making you a better person, you could create like an epic job where you're traveling the world and you're making great money and you're helping other people grow and have fun at the same time, and also helping other people suffering. Like, because Ken's model really helps you diagnose what does this population need. Because you just using the spiral dynamics, traditional people who are there are going to need a different kind of medicine than somebody who's at the part where they're like really focusing on diversity, but not really the big diversity. The little diversity is race and gender. Okay, that's important. I agree, it's important. But also, like, what about diversity of ideas? So like I think the diversity movement needs to get more expansive and more compassionate, because they're claiming that their version of justice is the only way to be compassionate, and I'm calling bullshit on that. I'm giving you permission to expand your idea of compassion and justice and diversity to include other ideas and other developmental levels. Trying to force a developmental level on someone earlier is just going to create war. You know what I mean? It's not, there's not going to be harmony in that. Like, what's important is, like, how about we don't kill each other? We know how to peacefully resolve conflict where there's overlap, and we don't have to take things so personally. Who cares if, like, somebody, I believe everybody's God. That's my belief. And everyone who puts in the effort can become a Buddha. And to me, a Buddha is having an epic, peaceful mind and crush it in the material world at the same time. I'm Jewish. I've had people throw Jewish flings at me, slurs at me. Like, who cares? Like, I don't know, he's not, that person wasn't going to punch me or something. I didn't sense it. They was trying to put me down. And I'm like, this person's not worth my time. Goodbye. It's just like healthy boundaries. I'm not going to try and force him to, I don't want to spend my time trying to make him wrong and escalate. It's like, who gives a fuck? You know what I mean? So, like, that's an example, like, where you're trying to force people into something they're not ready for. How about just like no more violence? If Earth gets like, what if we have like reduced violence a lot, if not to zero, or certainly zero in advanced countries, and just celebrate that and like, oh, dude, well, everyone can like relax. Oh, we solved that one, and now we got all this extra energy to put towards other things. We talked about earlier this compounding effect. I think you were talking about it, but I remember we had this sensation is like, boom, let's get that one out of the way. Now, we not only do we have peace, but we can relax around that. And a lot of the safety shit that we do, both psychologically and buying alarms and stuff, that kind of goes down, right? And you can spend that other energy on growth and having fun. So, like, I'm seeing a new abundance industry that's like next level fun and learning at the same time. So, like, I think this is like the most epic time to be alive, is to like be right on the tier where an enlightened society is around the corner, but not if we do it passively. we have to engage with that natural laws that are going to get us there, which, as you kept saying, involves a lot of compassion. Compassion absolutely means forgiveness in every moment, because everyone's trying the best they can via the context. But also, compassion is wisdom. It's not just empathy, it's intelligence. How do we forgive with intelligence? Someone's fucked you up, you might forgive them, but like, you're going to make sure that doesn't happen again because you love yourself, right? It's not about taking abuse over and over again. No, that's not it. We're done with, you can do both at the same time, because you want to send signals to people about boundaries. And how do you do that gracefully? How do you do it skillfully for yourself and others? These are new capacities that are emerging for the species that I'm teaching, and I'm sure some other people are. I'm very passionate about that. And I don't know, how does that land in your work? What are you also working with? What are some of the ones also, whether I mention them or not, that you're seeing as part of this enlightened society that you mentioned?
So there's one question that comes to my mind around all of this. And it goes back to, one, I'm curious your own stance on it and how it's informed by integral theory and Ken Wilber as well. You said something along the lines of, there's enough resources for everyone. Live the most incredible life. So does
Let's get real. Like, it's not distributed.
and that's where my question is going. It's not distributed, and what I see historically, a relationship between violence and money, like
Hmm.
how much money goes to the prison industrial war complex, how many billions of dollars are invested in alarms, these
Yeah, yeah, I hear you.
yeah, and so is there a economic, does Ken have a philosophy of how, gosh, it's like the fundamental kind of thing of, I guess I'm getting at, what would it be called, where there's just resource distribution, but in a way that's not tyrannical, and like how really how to live the practice of creating a space where it's, yes, everyone can have their survival needs met and they're focused fully on the joy, their purpose. And there's different community models. People talk about this and some people try it on a smaller scale, but
Yeah.
I'm asking on the big level, and what would be the process towards that based on
Yes.
integral theory? Is it clear what I'm asking?
Yeah. Let's get real. This is a process-oriented strategy with Jonathan Mozenter applying integral theory plus his other wisdom, because we just be honest, right? So I can't speak for Ken, but
Sure, yeah.
I did just meet with Ken personally, and my senses were probably on the same page. He used to have a course called Superhuman, and so my process with my belief is that we have so much untapped potential. It's beyond anyone's imagination about what's actually possible in the human body, especially if you
Mhm.
understand Buddhism. It's so much brighter than anyone could ever imagine because what they're pointing at, and I'm going to say it briefly because this could be like a whole episode for sure,
Mhm.
or five, but they're pointing to is you're the one who's making meaning of everything. So that's the where you start to understand that that's true, and the more you start to untap, you start to learn how to make meaning that everybody wins. Because once you've got security and a lot of money, you know, you're an overflow. Sure, you want to keep safe and keep having your good life, but if you could have other people be content, happy, better for everyone. They, then you have to worry about people like being assholes, police, it's just like there's so much energy. A lot of famous people are petrified. I sometimes I don't know, I'm into comedians and they talk about, not that some of them are more famous, but there's a cost to being really successful and known. And that's now another worried factor. Some nut jobs gonna, there was that guy, I forgot, he wasn't even a comedian, but he got stabbed by someone. He was like an author, and he said something about someone in Iran. But like stuff, there's been
I think I
incidents
heard
enough.
about
Yeah, there's enough incidents, whether it's just like this photographers not respecting their boundaries, and just it's like in everybody's best interest to everyone understands what if the protocols that are known for you to crush it. When I say crush it, if you follow these protocols, your life will get better, better, better. And eventually this probably pop at some point in time. You figure out how you're cool, what the Japanese call the ikigai. What is it that the universe is expressing uniquely through you that you can then spread to a lot more people? But it takes a little while to develop that. I'm 55 and I just feel like now I actually have something. So it takes a while, and you can pop a lot earlier than that, especially with AI and all these tools running. But I'm a Gen Xer, so I don't really care. You pop when you pop, and people can pop multiple times. But the thing is, you have to follow these different growth dimensions, and you have to test them out. So it's a process. So the people who are going to crush it first just fall in love with the process. So for me, it's like, how can I make it like gamify? How can I make the process of learning and development super fun, but not sugarcoating it. There's going to be what some people call bumps. I'd be like, oh, life is getting you set it up a little bit of a construction so that you can feel a pain. And so you can feel a little deeper. And you can do it with psychedelics in really safe ways. And you don't, and it doesn't have to be on psychedelics or altered states, although sometimes you can go a little faster with those tools. The process to me is, for me, and this is my thing, is I don't want to make it a war. I don't think a warring is the right way. I know a lot of people want to go to the quote unquote, whoever the fuck the Illuminati are, the people who've got hoarded a lot of money and they want to grab it back. And we all got to have, I'm like, I think that's fool's gold. It's never going to happen. I think it's completely unrealistic. I get the feeling of it. Why don't we just expand everyone? And the best I can do from my vantage point is help people understand their human design, their gene keys, and how does that interface with the life that's actually happening on Earth right now. And everyone, because you asked that earlier, like, how can you play your part? What if you could create a business that was successful and fun and also helped other people, either with some important dimension of life? And if everyone did that, then we talked about this is where that transpersonal we were talking about earlier, where there's you, and then there's the version that's connecting. So let's say there's an Earth God, right? It's just tracking Earth, and you can synchronize people more magically. Well, once you're more developed and you're very specific, you can get called in and you can get more magic can happen. But if you're not very precise about what you're doing, what you're trying to do, my experience, that sort of manifestation magic happens less often. You're just not clear. You need to have a clear signal. If it's a noisy signal scattered, like a lot of people scattered these days, and that's okay. I get it with all the like social media and stuff. You can use that neurodivergent brain to corral it. You can still have periods where you're just going all over the place. Keep that, but you also got to have periods with, okay, what grabs your attention so much that you can focus on it for longer periods of time. Sometimes it's an excitement thing. I always start with my client with what excites you, because if you're not excited, well, how likely are you going to follow through? And the follow through, the integration is the most important part. How are you going to go from an experience or reading a book and actually translate it into experiments in the world where you integrated it, and then it's not, then you go from a state to what Ken calls a trait. He calls this, as Ken Wilber speak, states become traits when you practice. And then you can add more traits and more traits. And if you think that's fun, like I do, the sky's the limit. It's just eagles all the way up. Yeah.
Yeah, bro. Yeah. Getting to that time, but I do want to mention my own work too. Right now, I have one-on-one client seat for the next week. So up until the end of June, I have space to take on that with someone that is wanting to discover and live as they truly are.
An intensive with Christopher.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And our Bulgarian pilgrimage.
Nice.
Doug and I are hosting it. We do an array of different practices, meditation, contemplation, and we have a freaking epic time. So this is one of the things that Sadka and I do because we want to do it anyway, and then we invite other people to join us. And I mean, I have not been transformational personally, and so I have others that have come with us, but it's also, to me, the very contemplative, joyful, lighthearted, relaxing form of transformation that we experience together as we're exploring ourselves, but with each other, and we're literally traveling around Bulgaria. A lot of nature time. It's very refreshing in the sense that we're not trying to fix ourselves because we're not broken. And we have a good time together. And through having a good time, lots of insights and clarities and friendships come through that prayer, that pilgrimage. So we have a limited number of spots. We have 5 left right now, and this is happening about 3 months away. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me or Zvodka, and we can talk about that. Yeah, man, stoked that we continue to have these conversations and see what comes alive through them. I'm wondering if there's more that you wanted to touch on about your meeting with Ken and what's
Oh, right.
coming through
Yeah.
with that. I don't know if you ever got.
Oh, yeah. So I met with Ken pretty recently. I was like a speaker at an integral theory conference. And then I got a one-on-one with Ken. And I met with him because I said, I have an idea how to bring integral to more people. I pitched him an idea about how do you take these different distinctions and have help you figure out which ones you need right now. He was excited about it. I'm going to keep in touch with him around that. When I connected to the higher dimensions, I had this vision of this app. I'm getting rolling on it. That's going to take a little while. It's basically taking my one-on-one coaching. So you don't have to wait for the app to get the experience. I usually meet with people in 3-month containers, but today, on today's episode, you can buy a discounted 5-pack. So ask for the Mozenter 5-pack special. You can just Jonathan at Mozenter.com, or you can just go to Mozenter.com and message me there. Or the other thing I'd message is YouTube at Mozenter, YouTube at Mozenter. And I got lots of free stuff on there. And Christopher, this was epic as always. Number 6, other level. I'm very feeling happy about the generative. I think if I want to finish on something strong here, and I mentioned this to Christopher before, but I want to make it public about the dynamic because I think it's available for other people. It's called generative relationships. Because everything at some level is a relationship between what you're observing and what's happening. So my whole goal is how do you make it everybody wins as much as possible as a skill, as a capacity. So that's a lot of what I teach in my coaching is how do you make it so you crush it and the world crushes it at the same time. And so generative relationships is this is a Jonathan Mozenter term as far as I know. I don't know if it's in Ken's work, is to me the value that I think comes from an integral understanding of life. When you look at these different distinctions, it enables a lot more likelihood you're going to find a general relationship than if you said a traditional. You only look at it. Well, let's just try traditional. There's only one vector. What if you've got all of a sudden 2 vectors, 3 vectors, 5 vectors, and it just keeps expanding, and you can cut the pies up in different ways, and before you know it, both of these got like more delicious pies than you ever imagined before because you have a new skill set. So that excites me in life.
And on that final note, I want to add to what I feel to be living in this generative relationship that Jonathan was just speaking of, whether it's reaching out to him for his work or me for my work or commenting. I invited you to take your journal out if you had an insight, if you have a question, if you don't like Jonathan's mustache, if you, whatever it is we want to know here to create this synergistically. So yeah, comment, let us know what your experience is what's coming through for you, how we can be of service to you.
Yeah, what topics we want to talk about.
How you could be of service to us. Whatever,
yeah.
Love we're here to do this. Everyone's winning. That's what we're going for with our Eagles all the way up episode. Spiritual Gangsters.
That was the line of the session.
Yeah. Thank you, bro. Thank you, everyone. Peace.
Thanks.